Good morning. Welcome to Unity Church-Unitarian, to those here in our sanctuary and also to those joining us online. I'm Reverend Laura Cowton. I'm Unity's Minister of Congregational Care. Welcome to this time and place where sorrow and joy, memory and hope weave together in remembrance of Bruce Evans Jacobson, whose presence in this life brought spirit and sustenance to so many. Today, we join together in the ancient tradition of celebrating a well-lived life with story and song, with honesty and mourning and love. All are welcome here. May you find this time a blessing. We're mindful that many faith traditions inform our individual journeys, and we hold in gratitude the foundations of love and service that these traditions hold in common. As is our Unitarian Universalist tradition, to mark the times that we gather as sacred time, we light a chalice flame, held in the light and warmth of truth and love. The light of a human life is sacred. It is sacred in its being born, it is sacred in its living, and it is sacred in its dying. In the presence of life, we say no to death. In the presence of death, let us say yes to life. I invite you to please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing, "Morning Has Broken." invite Michael to come forward and lead us in our responsive reading.
We Remember Them by Roland B. Jacobson. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. In unison, so long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us, as we remember them.
We come together in community to acknowledge our individual and our collective grief, to share what is gone from our lives because Bruce Jacobson has died, and also what is in our lives because he has lived. Every grief is unique and will show up in its own way, in its own time, whether invited or not. Feel your grief. Cherish it. Do not dismiss it or hide it. Do not hold back your tears if they come. Tears are the rain of your friendship, the salt of your love. And do not hold back your smiles or your laughter, if that is what comes to you. They are expressions of the joy of your friendship, the sweetness of your love. Griefs are many-layered. They are not singular. Even though this one grief is what you're holding now, it sits atop the many griefs of layers of grieving in our lives. It all comes back to us in its own time, in its own way. Before the wonder of living and dying, we are humbled. And in the midst of sorrow and grief, we feel a sacred connection to one another in our shared grief and to that which we hold sacred. Out of our memories and affection flows a thanksgiving. In our gathering together, in our compassion and our love with and for one another, healing begins again and again, and life is renewed. Let us share a moment of silence together for our own prayer in our own way. In our reflection and meditation, let us gather our individual thoughts and memories about the person who Bruce was, who he was to each one of you individually, how he touched your life, and let us prepare to say our farewell.
When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants slumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded by fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unspoken, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed.
As you set out for Ithaca, hope the voyage is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. Lystrigonians and Cyclops, angry Poseidon, don't be afraid of them. You'll never find things like that on your way as long as you keep your thoughts raised high, as long as a rare excitement stirs your spirit and your body. Laestrygonians and Cyclops, wild Poseidon, you won't encounter them unless you bring them along inside your soul, unless your soul sets them up in front of you. Hope the voyage is a long one. May there be many a summer morning when, with what pleasure, what joy, you come into harbors seen for the first time. May you stop at Phoenician trading stations to buy fine things, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, sensual perfume of every kind, as many sensual perfumes as you can. And may you visit many Egyptian cities to gather stores of knowledge from their scholars. Keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you are destined for. But do not hurry the journey at all. Better if it lasts for years, so you are old by the time you reach the island, wealthy with all you have gained on the way, not expecting Ithaca to make you rich. Ithaca gave you the marvelous journey. Without her, you would not have set out. She has nothing left to give you now. And if you find her poor, Ithaca won't have fooled you. Wise as you will have become, so full of experience, you will have understood by then what these Ithacas mean.
Will you please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing, "All people that on earth do dwell."
Welcome to this celebration of life for Bruce. Today we memorialize and celebrate Bruce by sharing memories of our experiences with him and the impact that he had on our lives. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried to recall your earliest memory? For some of us, that's pretty long ago, but the earliest memory I have of anything is from August 1948. Grandpa Lundgren and I were standing outside the hospital where not too many hours earlier, Mom had given birth to Bruce. Now, 2-year-olds were not allowed into maternity wards in those days. So we had to stand outside and watching up to the 4th or 5th floor to see if we could see something familiar. Bruce came into my life that day and has been part of it ever since I can remember. A few years later, as Bruce and I were passing through those tween years, we decided to take a day-long bike hike from North Minneapolis to Lake Harriet and back. In those days, there were few bike trails, and the good 3-speed English bikes were beyond our grasp. But it was an adventure to experience on the streets with our Columbia Cruiser bikes. We packed our lunch and headed out. Mom was not too comfortable with the idea, but she allowed us the freedom to explore. After eating lunch at Lake Harriet, we somehow found our way to Hiawatha Avenue and started north again. The mid-afternoon traffic was a challenge, even in those days. But we made it through downtown and home in time for dinner without incident. We related the details of our day's adventure at dinner that night. Mom was still uncomfortable, but she probably realized that her sons were starting to grow up. As Bruce was finishing medical school, he made a driving trip to Southern California to look at opportunities for internships. He stayed with Mary and I for a couple of days in our Long Beach apartment while talking to several hospitals. On the morning he was to depart, his VW Beetle would not start. Fortunately, the Beetle was light enough and unsophisticated enough that a push start would usually solve the problem. We recruited Mary to sit behind the wheel and operate the clutch, even though she was still a novice with manual transmissions at that time. Bruce and I started pushing the car down Euclid Avenue. When we had gathered enough speed, Bruce yelled out, "Clutch!" Mary popped the clutch, and with a puff of smoke, the car started. Bruce was on his way soon, but I always marveled that he was able to shepherd that car across plains, mountains, and deserts from Cleveland to Southern California and back. It has been said that a good life is a collection of happy memories. Bruce had a good life and made many happy memories as he lived them with us. We hope that those memories will bring joy and a sense of good life to those of us who remember him.
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name is Laurel Anderson, and I'm Bruce's niece. Amid such a sad time, it has actually been very joyful to reflect on my memories of Uncle Bruce, and particularly with my sister, Brianna Malone, who is also here from Bangkok, and we've collaborated on this remembrance, so you'll hear from her too. As we've talked over the last week, on the phone, through text, and in person to reflect about Bruce, all of our memories kept coming back to kind of 3 themes. The first was passion and community, the second was showing up, and the last was partnership. One of the first things I think of when I think of Bruce is the way he pursued his passions and interests and cultivated a community of like-minded friends around him. He was a passionate music lover, taking up piano lessons as an adult and sharing pieces he was working on at family gatherings. As Brianna put it, Uncle Bruce was the only person I knew that had a grand piano in his living room, one of his passions front and center in their home. I recall playing it a few times, and other times Bruce or Ann playing for us. A reminder to put something you love to do in a place where you can't ignore it. It's always available and ready for you to enjoy and interact with, and also becomes an invitation for any guest to interact with it as well. Probably it was an obvious decision for Bruce and Ann to include as part of their home, but you have to make space for it. A reminder to make space your passions and have it literally take up space in your home. And of course, he shared those passions with us. It was so important to Bruce that Brianna and I had access to music growing up that he bought a piano for our home so that we could take lessons. And the same goes for so many other interests. Of course, the legendary ski club. When the family was gathered in the hospital, someone half-jokingly said, "Does the whole ski club need to visit?" And Anne responded, not joking, "Well, they want to." Books and learning, the book club. Bruce always had something new to discuss. Windsurfing, teaching English, the outdoors. Brianna and I were fondly recalling ski and canoe trips Ann and Bruce took us and Ann's nephew, Mike and Dan, on as kids. We both remember being a bit grumpy on the canoe trip, but we both loved the outdoors as adults. And as Bree said, Bruce and Ann including us in how they enjoyed these pursuits was a lovely gift. Another thing about Bruce and Ann is that they showed up. When Brianna and I were small, Bruce was our single uncle who took the job very seriously. There are photos upon photos, some of them outside, of him pushing the stroller, reading books to us and our friends at birthday parties, skating shows, soccer games, graduations. Memorably, he showed up to square dance with us at our father-daughter event at the Y when our dad was outnumbered. And once he became part of the Morrissey family, he did the same for those nieces and nephews. Brianna remembers, Bruce and Ann were always there for everything. Any event and milestone, any celebration, they were there. I think it is something that I honestly have taken for granted, but reflecting in this moment, I realize what an act of love and generosity it is, prioritizing whatever your nieces are up to. This included throwing an engagement party for my husband, Kevin, and I, generosity with their time and their home. And he showed up in the hard times, too. Brianna shared this memory of Bruce at the funeral for our grandmother, Jacobson, his mother. After Grandma Marjorie died, we went as a family to the funeral home. It was the first person close to me who had died. Grandma's house had deteriorated for a long time, and I had witnessed that as a child, so I knew that her passing was sad, but also an end to her suffering. Being in the room at the funeral home, I got quite upset and went to sit on a couch in the corner and started to cry. Bruce quickly walked over and sat next to me and said something like, "It's sad she is gone, but she left us some time ago, and now all of her can be at peace." I don't remember quite what he said, but that's the gist I remember. And then he just sat with me for a while I cried. He had just lost his mom, but also saw me and made a point to try and provide me some solace in a difficult moment. More recently, Bruce and Ann showed up to the funeral when we tragically lost my closest childhood friend and her children. It was such a lesson to me, the simple power of being there. Brianna said being here today is about honoring the way he showed up for me in my life. I want to show up for him and my family as we process this loss. When Bruce was diagnosed with Huntington's, it would have been understandable if he had chosen to retreat. Huntington's disease has been a traumatic experience for our family, and the fear of the future must have been unfathomable. But Bruce didn't. He remained engaged, took care of himself, and I'm so grateful he had so many good years. Finally, I think of Bruce as the consummate partner. Anne coming into his life and our family's life completed everything. And the rainy wedding in June was the time of my life as an 8-year-old. But I've come to appreciate their partnership and love story more once I was single and 40. Opening oneself up, coming together as a family after being independent for so long, and then still getting to have a long and successful marriage. It's not from the faint of heart, but look at the payoff. And as I do get married this year, I hope that we will have all the happiness that you did. Brianna's first comment to me after Bruce died was a memory of Bruce and Ann preparing a meal at their home in St. Paul. "What a team they are," she said to me. I can still think of so many times I experienced their joint hospitality, and I'm sure many of you are having that image flash through your mind as well. Ann, I'm sorry that you've lost your partner, but you will always be a part of that team. You accomplished what you set out to do at that super fun wedding 34 years ago. You fulfilled your vow. Thank you for allowing me to share a few memories. And as we part, may I humbly suggest a few ways to honor Bruce. First, remind yourself of something you love to do or something that you've always been interested in trying and do it. Take a piano lesson, get on the ski trail, join a book club. Show up when you can. You've already done that today for Bruce, but look for those opportunities to be the one who is present and the one who notices. And if you have or have had a love of your life, be grateful for them. Appreciate the joys of partnership. We love you, Bruce. We love you, Anne. Thank you for sharing your life with us.
Good morning, everyone. I would like, first of all, to thank you for coming to help celebrate Bruce's life today. I can't tell you how much that means to me, to my family, and to Bruce's family. Bruce's death was totally unexpected, a shock to all of us. And I'm sure to him, if he had any awareness of it, which I hope he didn't. As he often said to me, women tend to linger. Men go off like rockets. And that's exactly what Bruce did. And that's how he hoped he would go, though maybe not quite so soon. I'd like to share just a bit of Bruce's life with you, especially his life after Huntington's. Bruce loved life, and he lived a good life. If you happen to read his obituary in the newspapers, you probably noticed that Bruce really knew how to live. He went straight from a lot of schooling into retirement. Way to go, Bruce. He did actually practice several years at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, where he was known as the guy to go to if nobody else could figure out what you had. He was the darling of the grand rounds. After they all discussed your symptoms, they would call in Bruce. And Bruce was tickled by that. He was glad to be able to help. Bruce himself was a healthy guy. He only had one medical event in his life, and that was his knee replacement, which he had in 2014. But he got over that quickly. When he came out of the anesthesia, they gave him a bowl of soup, which Bruce wolfed down, and then he ordered a full turkey dinner. He was also rigorous about his physical therapy. He took his meds, and forever after, he advised friends to take their meds when you have a new limb or a joint replaced so that you can do your PT. And that's what Bruce did. And 2 weeks after that surgery, he went on a tour of Mystery Caves in southern Minnesota. While he was still practicing medicine, he got Wednesday afternoons off. This was typical of physicians. They typically took a half day off. They would do their rounds in the morning, but then take an afternoon off to have a little free time, and that was to make up for all the nights that they were on call. And so that was an opportunity for Bruce to pursue his passion of music, which he had become acquainted with classical music when he was in college. And he developed a love of the harpsichord, and then he actually had one in his house for a while, but That wasn't the greatest instrument for him. And he also had a love of the organ. And so I was so glad to hear the organ this morning. It was fabulous. But he ultimately signed up for piano lessons at McPhail. Piano was a little cheaper, a little easier to get into your house. And so he began his career as a pianist. He was no Van Cliburn, but he played the piano and he loved the piano. He had a lot of fun with it. He played easy Bach inventions. Bach, of course, was his hero. He also, somewhere along the way, picked up a song by William Bolcom. It was a ragtime tune called The Graceful Ghost. And he liked that song, and he got a copy of the sheet music, and he learned how to play it, which was amazing because it's a challenging piece of music. And it was written in honor of Bolcom's father, who had recently died. So in the meantime, I had also started piano lessons, not at McPhail, but with a different teacher. And we used to have student recitals at different people's houses. And one time when we were hosting the recital, everybody was chatting typically, and pretty soon they quieted down because they knew what was coming. And today my teacher said, "Well, who would like to go first?" We all looked at each other, hoping somebody else would volunteer. And then Bruce jumped up and he said, "I will." Bruce wasn't one of his students. So everybody was astonished, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is he going to play? And he sat down, he dug out the Graceful Ghost, and he played the Graceful Ghost. And it was a little bit rocky, but he got through it. And in doing so, he set everybody else at ease. After that, everybody could get up and play and do their thing. And we're going to hear it a little bit later this morning. And when the theme comes in a second time, it's a little quieter, a little slower. That's the ghost. That's the Father coming, returning. And I also love this piece, and I'm glad we're going to get to hear it again today. I'm looking forward to that. When Bruce got into his retirement years, he, in addition to the fun things he did, he began teaching English as a second language. And at the beginning, he started out as an aide in an ESL classroom, but within the first year, they asked him if he would take on a class of his own, which he was happy to do, and he did that for many years. And it was really fun. It was a morning class, and he'd come home in time for lunch, and I would just be eager to hear the stories of how the morning went. And one time he came home, and he was tickled to death. He said, one of his students, and I think it was a fellow from Ecuador, had followed him out the door, and he said, "Thank you, Mr. Bruce, my #1 teacher." And Bruce was proud to tell me about that. It was exciting for him. Unfortunately, after the Huntingtons developed, it was harder and harder for him to teach because he needed to be able to keep his thinking quick and on the mark and be responsive, and that got to be more difficult. It was in November of 2014 that Bruce was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. It's caused by a wayward gene, and it's sometimes, or otherwise known as Huntington's chorea. He was initially depressed, and this lasted for about 6 months, and he lost weight. And at some point, he requested an antidepressant from his physician, which was readily granted. And we drove to the pharmacy to pick it up. Bruce drove. And when we got home, instead of turning into the driveway, he said, "Let's go for a little spin." And he drove down to the river, and then down the river road for a mile or two, and then he turned into the neighborhoods and drove around a little bit. And then we got home, back to the driveway, and he put the car in the garage. And that was the last time he ever drove. And he never said a word about that. He never told me he was not going to drive. He just, the next time we had to get the car out, he said, "Would you like to drive?" And I said, "Sure." And that continued to happen until I finally realized that Bruce was no longer driving. But he became my navigator. And he was a wonderful navigator. He'd say, "A little to the left. We're going to turn here now." Then he'd look up on the computer the exact directions to where we were going to go, and he'd map it all out, and then he'd point the way. And he was my GPS, so I've never worked with GPS. I don't know how GPS works. But the other thing is, when we got home from picking up the antidepressants, he went into the house, put the pills down on the island, and he just stared at them. And then he got out all the paperwork, the indications, contraindications, side effects, went through the whole thing. And I bet he was there over an hour. And then he turned around and he put those pills in the back of the cookie drawer, and they never got opened. He just decided that he wasn't going to let the depression get him down. And he knew that he could live yet a while longer with Huntington's, and he was going to figure out a way to do it. And that was when we started the 4-mile walks every day. We went down to Lifetime 3 or 4 times a week and did the elliptical. And it was like he started a new life with Huntington's, but at the same time, he gradually built up. That's when we did all our Civil War tours and our Rhodes Scholar tours. He was able to travel and do fun things. He raised a vegetable garden. We went hiking a lot of different places on the North Shore. He continued to swim, but he did give up the canoe, and he did give up the windsurfing. Just a little too off balance for that. He continued to ski, astonishingly to his doctors. They just couldn't believe that he could ski with Huntington's. And Bruce skied. He skied races. And in the United States and in Europe, he skied Birkebeiners. He skied from after breakfast until sunset. We'd go on weekend ski trips every single weekend. And he never trained for races. He just skied for fun because he loved it. He loved being out. He had his bag lunch with him. And he was a great skier. And he also had a great sense of humor. And we went to Stokely Creek a lot, which was our favorite place to go and ski. And one time he was out there with a bunch of us, and he was hopping around on one foot. He was trying to get his other foot into the binding on the ski. And one of our friends called out, "Bruce, I like your dance." And Bruce shot back, "That's Korea. Do you like the choreography?" Another time, we were going to Stokely. Instead of taking our usual chartered bus, we took a Greyhound, of all things. And that bus was seeming to go in a little bit different route. And Bruce asked the driver, "Does this bus go to Duluth?" And the driver said, "No, it goes beep, beep." So that's the Bruce I knew. Bruce was forever cracking me up. And I have to say that even in the support group, we went once a month to the support group, which was a wonderful group, and everybody had a chance to talk a little bit about how the previous month went, their challenges with Huntington's, or caregivers' challenges, or the fun things they did. And when it was Bruce's turn to talk, I never knew what he was going to say. But somehow at the end of his little talk, everybody was laughing. And this happened month after month. Bruce just had a way of putting people at ease and helping them deal with Huntington's and realize that it's not the end of life and you still can live and have a good time. You can live with Huntington's and you can enjoy life even with a condition like Huntington's. He was a humble man, he was a wonderful life partner, and I'm so glad that I met him and was able to share his life. And I'm glad today that all of you are here to be able to share a bit of his life. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Liz. Bruce Evans Jacobson was born August 13th, 1948, and he died January 10th, 2025. In between these thresholds of birth and death, Bruce lived a full and rich life for 76 years. Too short. The details of Bruce's life can be found in the obituary in the order of your service, and I'm sure if you did a Google search, you might find some more. But the particulars of a person's life are, of course, unique. And there's a person's essence that shines through, a consistent thread that weaves itself in and out of those details, the details of what he did that tell us who he was. The beautiful story of who Bruce was and how he lived his life. And that is what we are here to share today. One of those threads that I see shining so clearly through is a person who delighted in life, took great joy in living. And in turn, those who knew and loved Bruce took great joy in him. We've heard from Bruce's family just what a special person he was in their lives, but I'm sure that each of you here also have stories about how Bruce has touched your life. And I hope you take some time to share those stories in our parish hall after this service as you gather with the family. And in getting to know Bruce myself these past weeks through stories and photos that the family has shared with me, his spirit shines so clearly through with his infectious smile, his animated face in his photos. He just always seemed to be so present where he was. The adventures that he and Anne had and the life that they built together, inseparable in their love. I imagine his patients at Abbott Northwestern Hospital all felt his presence in meaningful ways, as I'm sure the entire medical staff and community did too. A lifelong learner, Bruce was curious about everything. He read voraciously and traveled a lot, sure to know something about that place before he even got there, its history, its geography, its business, its climate. If you ever went on a walk with Bruce, you had to be prepared to learn something. He would point out the different species of trees and identify animal scat and tell you who was just there. He would comment on natural and human-made land formations and objects. And he was so engaging to be with because he knew so much about the surrounding context in which you might find yourself. And his curiosity was infectious. His mind was a data field of life's facts and history tales. And I'm sure that many of you have picked up some tidbits of information. Apparently, Bruce was really good at Scrabble. And while some of the other adults around suspected that he was cheating, in fact, he simply had the most luminous vocabulary. Bruce's intelligence was incredible, and he displayed this in such a humble manner. The story of how he played awkwardly a piece so that others could feel comfortable to present theirs. describes that humility. As a doctor, Bruce was fascinated by the science of medicine. And many years ago, when Anne's brother-in-law was facing brain cancer, Bruce, although no longer practicing medicine, committed to accompanying Bill to medical appointments and always patiently explained the processes and procedures to the family who had little understanding of the illness so that they could be more present and aware, offering his steady and comforting presence himself. One niece shared how Bruce took a real interest in her participation in Nordic skiing when she was in high school. And every time she went to a new place, Berkey Trails in Hayward, Wisconsin, or Grants Ridge in Biwabik, Minnesota. So I'm from Canada. ABR in Michigan, or help me on this one, Maple Log? Oh, that was too easy. It could have been Maplog. So anywhere that she went, Bruce, of course, had already been there. And he would ask about the trains and the trails and compare notes on the certain trails and talk about which ones that he liked or the ones he didn't care for, and tell about his experiences in the same place so that they could have a shared experience. He took such a great interest and seemed to relish hearing that his dear niece was learning to love Nordic skiing as he did. He was always so active. He and Anne would often be off swimming between the docks at Forest Lake, dodging the boats and skiers on the lake as they went. And then later, after a day of playing in the water, Anne and Bruce could be found reading on the top of the hill, inevitably a classic book or on history or biography, still learning. They shared countless dinners with loved ones on top of that hill at Forest Lake, building memories to last many lifetimes. Bruce was the kind of guy who took up windsurfing in retirement and taught English to immigrants, not letting his Huntington's disease slow him down or keep him from enjoying his active lifestyle or his continued learning. He was generous with his time and encouragement for others. Anne and Bruce cared deeply about the activities and interests of their many nieces and nephews, and made sure to catch up with each of them at family gatherings. Bruce came to soccer practices, marching band parades, matches, wrestling matches, solo recitals, and orchestra performances. As Lauren said, he showed up. He always expressed a keen interest in what was happening, how the kids had prepared, what they were up to, what they were doing next. Some fond memories that Bruce's family has shared with me were of Anne and Bruce taking the kids on weekend adventures. Canoeing and camping trips where Bruce taught them how to hang food in the trees to avoid the wildlife, and cross-country skiing at state parks and Giants Ridge. Bruce taught the kids and their friends how to windsurf on Forest Lake, visiting on top of the hill, just hanging out in the sun, on the grass, swapping stories. Pontoon rides out on the water. I'm sure those were fun. Just hanging out, just being present with one another. Many meals Bruce's pancakes were legendary. He attributed his pancake success to never cleaning the cast iron frying pan. Now, whatever his secret was, they really were spectacular pancakes, were they not? One of his nieces apparently ate 12 in a sitting. Not putting anyone on the spot. One memorable experience was a trip hiking with Bruce and Ann in Yosemite National Park. He really was keen on adventure. They went approximately 20 miles over several days, up and down over 1,000 feet, to the abrasive edge of the granite peaks, with spectacular views of the lakes and the meadows and the giant redwood trees. And at the end of the day, they all sat on the deck and marveled at the hikes of the day. Had a good bottle of beer or a glass of wine. You can picture it. One of Bruce's nephews shared a memory of going on a ski weekend with Ann and Bruce when he was quite little. There were some big hills, and he says, we came to one that was huge, and Ann and my sister and I, we wouldn't go down. But Bruce stepped up to show us how it was done. He took off and he went down at full speed, and unfortunately, he caught an edge at the bottom and wiped out, breaking his ski binding. Well, that didn't deter me, he says. However, I was so impressed with how gutsy he was. Well, I didn't ski down the whole hill, but I walked partway down, and then I skied down the rest of the way, and then I did the same thing over and over and over again. Bruce was gutsy. In that last week, when he was in the hospital, some of his friends stopped by, many, and to a one, they all exclaimed how much they loved Bruce. Anne has received countless calls and cards from skiing partners and companions and others with Huntington's, people who went to the orchestra or the theater with them, all saying the same thing. Bruce was beloved. The classic poem, Ithaca, that we heard earlier by the Greek poet C.P. Cavafy, was inspired by Homer's Odyssey, urging the traveler to seek adventure and knowledge on the way to Ithaca. It starts out, as you set out for Ithaca, hope your road is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. A fitting testimony, this poem is, for the marvelous, experience-rich journey of Bruce's life, full of discovery, full of adventure, full of love. And in the end, Bruce understood well what these Ithacas mean. Thank you, Bruce, for journeying with us. I invite you to take a breath together and then rise as we join in singing, "Shall We Gather at the River?" We've heard about Bruce's life, his passion for learning and adventure, his love of family, the way he showed up, his generosity of time and compassion. It is now our task to turn once again to our own lives and make them a testament to the love and the learnings of joy and life that Bruce brought to his. Always learning, always teaching, always growing and exploring and adventuring, living life to its fullest in the joys of activities and tending to priceless relationships. This is now our work. Though we extinguish our flame, we know that the spark of life still burns within each of us, and we know that the light of Bruce's life still shines within our hearts. In the spirit of love, we have gathered. In the spirit of love, gentle people, let us depart. May we go in peace. Amen.